Hey, everybody, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Franchise Advisory Board. I've got with me today Conrad Kolba, who's a good friend of mine, but also he's a bit of a rock star in the space, but a quiet one. He'll shrug, see that face? That's what I'm talking about. So original founder of Five Star Painting, co-founder of Five Star Franchising, Franchise Foundry. He's the founder of Painter One as well. So one of these guys that most people like this, they get bit by the bug and they stay in the industry and keep making waves. And Conrad, though, he's got a different approach that I've really appreciated. He's very structured, very operational minded, but very strategic, where a lot of people get a little myopic in franchising. So Conrad, I'm not going to say anything else. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do with Painter One and in the franchising industry.
So a little bit about me, I guess. I've been in the franchising / painting industry pretty much my entire life. We've had a lot of different franchise systems throughout my career. I've been a part of a lot of different franchise systems, but painting is in my heart, and it's a very simple business, and it's easy to excel within the industry, and the profit margins are pretty good. You wouldn't think of a service or a painter making a fair amount of money, or a painting business making a fair amount of money, but they sure can. And the net income at the end of the day is pretty good. It's a lot better than other franchise systems that we've been a part of. So Painter One came about not by necessarily my doing, but I was convinced to franchise Painter One by a friend of mine, by Jason Lieber. And I'm glad he convinced me, but it took a little bit of convincing for me to get back into the franchising world, because it was so challenging, especially with an emerging brand. Mm-hmm. And getting things off the ground like that. That's a huge rock to push up the mountain. But because we've done it before, it was easier, but still not easy. But we changed a few of the way that we did lots of things within our franchise system with Painter One. So Painter One is quite unique with its with some of the ideas that we had for it.
Yeah, well, and I think we're gonna unravel some of that together today, Conrad. So thanks for making time to join us. And again, guys, I'd recommend you listen and take some notes, because Conrad's approach is a little different, cuts against the franchising community grain a little, but in a very good way. So let's just dive right in, Conrad, because there are a number of things and aspects of your business model, or things that you and I have chatted about separately, that I'd like to draw out. One of which is, let's just start with royalty structures, because this is an area where I see a lot of organizations make some mistakes early on, and they become too dependent upon cash influx from franchise fees, things like that. Talk to us a little bit about the strategy behind building a royalty structure that fits.
So I guess the first thing you need to do if you're thinking about franchising or your emerging franchise system is that your royalty needs to fit the industry. Some franchises have 15-20% royalty. Others have 3 or 4% royalty. But if you start at the 15% royalty and it should be at 4% royalty, there's obviously a problem there. So do a little research to figure out what fits the model, and what works, what fits the economics of your franchise system specifically. You might do something that is a little bit different, and it may say, your competitors may say, oh, ours is at 7%, but you can say, well, I'm going to put mine at 9% because we fulfill this and this and this for the franchisee, which mm-hmm. eliminates their cost but increases our cost. But in the end, it's the royalty revenue can be more.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there. A lot of franchise systems that are emerging brands think that I got to go low. I want it to be competitive so people will buy in. However, the beauty of franchising is the shared services model for a lot of these folks. Let's think home services or others. Can we streamline X, Y, or Z process, centralize it so that our franchisees really can focus on selling and closing deals, but maybe what we centralize the marketing, or we centralize X, Y, or Z. I think that a lot of them are a little myopic, and then they find themselves saying, oh, we've got to increase royalties. Oh, we've got to increase royalties. Oh no, we got to add new funds because we're under budget for what we're trying to do to support our franchises.
Yeah, and one of the things you said about centralizing certain aspects of the business is actually extremely important. One of the things that I would caution against, and this is one of the things we did that made us different in the franchising space with 5 stars, we had a call center.
Mhm.
And we were the first one in our industry, as far as I can remember, that did that. And it was revolutionary. It was go, oh, a call center can answer. But, in hindsight and in reality, what a kind of disaster it was.
Well, yeah, I know you're not being disparaging. You just lived through it because you were the operations wizard that made it all work. But give us some cautionary feedback about centralizing certain services. Like how does that impact the business and the cost model?
Well, specifically, I'll go into the call center. Like I actually moved my office up into our call center up on the second floor back in the day, and I was there for several months, and I had my hands in my face most of the time listening to the call center answer phone calls, or it was challenging. Now there are certain things that can be systematized on a corporate level, like marketing.
Yeah.
Marketing is a fantastic, should be run on a corporate level, and then have the franchisee decide, okay, I want this, but it's all done for, not all done for them, but the programs are set up, and the franchisee can say, I want to do this one, that one, and that one. But the relationships should be made by the franchisor, whether it be for like for us in the home services industry, you're going to have somebody doing your Google places or your places. You're going to probably have some sort of relationship with a home advisor or some sort of third-party lead gen, Angie's List or Thumbtack or something like that, where you're going to buy leads. All that can be centralized relatively easily at the corporate level or side of things. And not be scared of other things that are local. Franchisees will come up and say, hey, there's this fantastic thing in our neck of the woods that works really, really well. And don't be scared of that. Don't say, no, you can't do that. Explore it, see what happens.
Yeah. Well, before we move on too much from the kind of the money questions people might have, you've had some interesting concepts. Well, actually, one that you didn't put on, we didn't talk about beforehand, but one we did. So having maybe even negotiating like declining royalty rates as revenue increases. If you don't mind, share some thoughts on that. And also, how do you protect yourself from franchisees buying multiple units and then camping out and not deploying effectively? Because that can actually be, initially it looks cool on paper to have this many units sold, but can be crippling to franchise system growth when you've sold 5 units into Dallas. So Dallas is locked up with one owner and they're rolling out 1 unit every 3 years. You've got all sorts of unharvested territory that's now not generating royalty or revenue for the franchise owner. Could you talk to both of those? Because I see those as being kind of tricky areas in the franchising community that people don't address well.
Okay, so the first one was a declining royalty.
Yeah.
It's a simple incentive for the franchisees to hit certain numbers. Like when we very first started with 5 Star, it was a declining royalty from 5, 4, 3, and then 2% as their final. And I don't remember the breakdowns anymore, but with our current one, once they hit $1 million in annual sales, their royalty goes down to 4% and then kind of stays there. Yeah. And it's not that it's I don't know that the franchisee is like, oh, I have to hit $1 million because then my royalty goes down and I'm going to make 1 extra percent. That's not the incentive, but it is the incentive to have them to grow their business so that we do get more royalty revenue, but it's not going to be that's not the primary motivator for them. But it's a nice pat on the back, say, hey, fantastic job. Here's 1 extra percent to your bottom line now, or 2, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and a lot of franchise systems like to give out plaques and awards for hitting those milestones too, which is great. Franchisees like recognition and kudos. Peer-to-peer recognition is important, but a lot of them care more about that maybe an extra cash they get to put in the bank at the end of the year when the royalty declines. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the other thing you were talking about is protecting yourself against locations that underperform.
Yeah. Yes.
And we had, as your franchise system grows or begin, you want to say, oh, I'm going to give you this massive area so that you can be super successful. And then as you get bigger and bigger and years go by, you're like, oh man, I gave that guy a huge territory. That's 3 territories. And man, and he's only doing $200,000 a year or whatever the number is out of it. And the royalty revenue out of that is, 10 grand for the year. But man, he could be doing like $3 million a year out of it. So Painter One, we did a little bit differently. We said, here's the area. You're allowed to work within this area. It can be a monster of an area, but know that there will be others working within that area also. They're not necessarily in competition with each other, because once a customer calls a Painter One, it's like, oh, I've already got an appointment with Painter One. They don't know that there are multiple Painter Ones within the area. They just get to the first one and then go there. But at the same time, it allows franchisees to grow within an area as a collective, as a group, as a team. And we've seen this with our franchise system, that the more that there are franchisees within a certain area, the more organic growth for the franchise system that is there. Mm-hmm. The franchisees together spend less money on marketing than they otherwise would have if they had just their one little location here. They had this location there, that, because they're working together on the marketing side of things. Mm-hmm. So it's a nice thing for the franchisee, because they get this organic growth because everybody's marketing, everybody's doing it, and they're all cross going. These guys' trucks are going to this guy's area, and this guy put a yard sign in this guy's area, or whatever it might be, and it's just building the brand all together. And building the brand awareness is what helps not only sell franchises, but also with unit economics. Mm-hmm. It's important that another thing for a franchisor to think about this also is that the impact on royalty revenue. Mm-hmm. We go back to that first scenario where that one guy sits on this massive territory and he does $200,000 a year, or let's say $1 million a year, and royalty revenues at 5%, so you're making 50 grand off them, which is great, but the potential of it could be the $3, $4, $5 million. But if he's comfortable, you're stuck. You either buy the territory back from him and then resell it in 3 chunks, which is costly and cumbersome, or start your system with a little bit of, I don't want to say foresight, but with a little bit of understanding of how giving up large territories and having prescribed or specific territories. You can't go out of this line and nobody else can come in this line, what that can do for you on the financial side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great insight. Conrad, before we move on from like royalties and kind of the funding mechanisms in franchising, talk a little bit about ad funds, if you don't mind, marketing spend or tech funds. So some of the ancillary funds that every franchise system should have in their FDD. How have you seen those used well and even poorly, if you don't mind sharing a good example of how to not do it?
I think with, yes, they have all those funds. There's lots of different fees that one could charge the franchisee. I would caution any kind of upcoming franchisor to not say, oh, we're going to put this fee in there and that fee in there and that fee and this fee, because the franchisee can get overwhelmed with it. Mm-hmm. They may look at the royalty and say, oh, my royalty is 6%. And then with all the fees, it becomes 14%. And then they'll look at this, and then there's this conflict between the franchisee and the franchisor, thinking the franchisee, that's all they care about is my money. Just give me my money. That's all they care about. Or that's what the franchisee's expectations or perceptions are. Or it's not really the case, but sometimes it gets costly by adding all those fees. Mm-hmm. But you have to have it in the franchise agreement, because you never know what's going to happen in the future. Yeah. Your costs could go up, something could happen, and you may need to say, franchisees, I know we've never done this for the past 18 years, but we have to start instituting this technology fee, or we have to do this, and these are the reasons why. Mm-hmm. Ad fund is a curious one. Specifically, ad fund, my business partner Jason Lieber, he likes to call it the brand building fund, and I think that's a far better name for it than ad fund. Mm-hmm. Ad fund, or the brand building fund, is specifically to build the brand, whether it be through franchise sales, whether it be through franchisee unit economics, whether it be for putting billboards out on freeways, or whatever it might be. It's meant to build the brand. One of the things that I would say for upcoming franchise, or even all franchisors really, is to make sure that those spends are transparent. Mm-hmm. Reality is that the money that a franchisor collects is quasi trust money. It's not our money. It's money that needs to be spent on the system on behalf of the franchisee to grow the brand. Yeah. And like I say, we can do a myriad of things with that money. but it's meant to be spent on building the brand. And whatever we feel is important enough for that, or what fits that model, we can plug that in. But being transparent with the spends is also an important thing as well with the franchisees.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned this before, even in like the lead gen, like if you wouldn't use an ad fund for this necessarily, but it's the same concept. You see a service that your franchisees are prescribing to, and centralizing that cost model and reducing it for them is a value add. I've seen some folks do things like that with ad funds. Sometimes use it for some marketing technology. Sometimes use it for very specific things. I know some groups use it for national television campaigns, because when they buy for 50 units and centralize that cost, it's actually dirt cheap to get a lot of airtime. And or some people are starting to get into the audio advertising now and slide into Pandora and Spotify and things like that. But they'll buy centrally with ad fund and actually create a lot of scale, economies of scale with it.
Yep. One more thing to add about the financial side of things, if we will, is that there's not a lot of money to be made, but there's a decent amount of money to be made on vendor rebates.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'd caution all franchisors, including me, is to not be greedy with that. It's
Mm-hmm.
money that the franchisee has spent on some sort of item or thing that the business needs. And usually it's the franchisor who creates a vendor program or a rebate program with the vendor. And the money usually comes back to the franchisor to do what the franchisor feels is necessary to do with it. I would be transparent as much as you possibly can with your franchisees with this.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we give it all back. We don't keep one penny of it. Whatever comes in goes out. And it's another thing that the franchisees appreciate, because in reality, it kind of is their money. But it's nice that we don't have to fight about it. In previous franchise systems, we fought about it. That there's like, all this money that it's costing me because I'm having to pay for it, you're keeping. And it eliminates a fight, and it creates goodwill within the franchisee and franchisor. So as much as you can, and if your economics can say, hey, we're going to give this back, or we're even going to give some of the ad fund back. I have a friend who gives a little bit of the ad fund back, just a little bit of the ad fund back, if the franchisees submit their P&Ls on a monthly basis. That's fantastic information for franchisors, mm-hmm. and it's incentivizing them monetarily for being compliant.
That's actually a really good idea for being compliant, or for sharing maybe additional insights as well, or for participation. Let's say they're volunteering their time to participate in the FAQ, or I've heard of a couple of incentives that the franchisors use to incentivize a positive behavior that might be above and beyond what's required in the agreements. That's smart. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and chat about staff, because there's a lot that I'd love to pick your brain about today, Conrad. So how do you set up a system? And this is one thing that I've been very impressed with Painter One, by the way. That it's different. It's really different. And obviously your expertise and experience is being poured into this concept that's now growing with you. How do you create a franchise coaching? Because this is a challenge. I see a lot of franchise systems. They'll say, hey, we got this operating manual and you just bought, and good luck, and we'll train you, right? Come into the office, we'll do training. We might even have a field rep come and stop by and see how things are going early on, and then good luck. And it's kind of a handoff, right? Baby giraffe a little bit. So how do you avoid that? What are some recommendations you have about setting up coaching systems and mentoring?
Oh, yes, that's kind of how it is to some degree within the franchising industry. They'll come to training, usually at corporate, and then somebody hopefully from corporate will go to their location to do a kickoff or a grand opening, or maybe they're going for a month or two, and then they come in to spend a couple of days with them and refine their business. Oh, you're totally screwing this up, or this thing's really good, or hey, have you thought about, there's that ongoing coaching, which is really challenging, because usually the founder of the franchise system knows how to do the thing that the business does. In my case, painting. Mm-hmm. I'm not a good painter anymore. I used to be a good painter, but I know how to paint. I know how to apply stuff. I know product knowledge. I know a lot of that, but I cannot do a good job coaching every single one of the franchises. It's just impossible. And if I try and hire a coach or a franchise consultant or whatever you want to call them, they don't have my experience. They don't know how to hire a crew. They don't know how to do the things that I know how to do. They can read it in the operations manual, but they can't give personal insight, or they don't have experience behind that. So a lot of the words, or a lot of the coaching that comes from a coach to a franchisee is kind of hollow, or it's not done with it's just a lot more challenging because they can't think on their feet because there's no experience to draw from. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you want, I'll talk a little bit about what we did to overcome that with Pay the One, is that there are certain things that we can handle on a corporate side of things. Marketing, financial side of things, to making sure that they understand the financial things, like when they submit P&Ls, we can go over that. Technology, ad funds, things like that we can control on a corporate level for everyone. We do that very well. But for the franchisees, what we do is we do have them come to training at our corporate side for a couple of days, and we go over those things that we're good at, or that we know we can concentrate, we can coach the franchisee on very well, like the finances, the marketing, the technology, stuff like that. And then for the thing that the business actually does, we team them up with a more senior franchisee, one who is knocking it out of the park, one who's doing very, very well. We've created a very a really cool culture of sharing within our franchise system. And so we team up a new franchisee with a mentor. And after the new franchisee comes for training here, they go into their mentor's location. And now that they've had some information about how the structure of the business, things like that, they're like, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I quote on that? How do I start this? How do I end that? And then they will go and physically do that with their mentor for a couple, 3 days. And then the mentor is basically their best buddy for the next however long it is. And then after a month or two, the mentor will go into the new franchisee's location and do the refinement. Hey, how come this isn't happening? Oh, I didn't think about that. Or, it's just that getting involved on a daily basis with that franchisee, but also in their location. And could I be that person for all franchisees? I physically cannot, because there's not enough time in the day for me to be able to spend with that. And usually, like, I'm in Utah. Painting in Utah is very different than painting in San Francisco, or painting in New York, or painting in Florida. It's very different. So if you're able to team up a mentor with that certain location and the humidity levels, and or whatever it is for your locations, it's so much better. It's so much better because they understand the industry in that location versus the national industry of it.
Yeah. Conrad, one thing I love to interject for a second about this model is we all know how franchisees over time start to respond to corporate driven insights, right? Even though your role as a franchisor is to provide insights, drive change, share market insights that they just, they don't pull their heads up sometimes to see what's coming down the road. And that's your goal. It's your role as the franchisor. However, there's always that natural angst between the franchisor and franchisees. And one thing I love that you've kind of sidestepped here with this whole process is it's peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer is by far the most effective way to influence change in any franchise system that I've ever seen. And whether that's a technology change, a marketing tool change, or just behavior in general. So I love that you guys have kind of harnessed that and built a system and a model that creates very effective coaching, because you're not relying upon somebody you've hired at the corporate office who might not have the same level of experience, or maybe they do. Even if they do, they can't have the same level of experience regionally as you can have with someone like that. So I think it's really genius. Thanks for sharing about that.
And the mentor, I kind of feel to say this, but the mentor is financially rewarded for that. So for how the way that we do it is that we give them 50% of the royalty for the first year, and then it declines over, I think it's 30, then 10 over the next couple of years. And the reality is the mentor is working hard for the first 3 to 6 months. Then after that, it's kind of a passive income because there's not a ton of communication with them.
Yeah,
I think that's cool. We've when you're starting your franchise system, you're thinking, okay, here's my organizational chart. This is what I need to have happen. When we hit these stages of growth, I need to hire this person, then that person, then this person, then that person. And coaches is one of those things that you're like, well, how many people can my coach actually support? Is it 10? Is it 50? Is it 30? Or what is it? So the mentor program is the one-to-one. It's one-to-one.
Yeah.
So we'll have to think about that. But then there are other problems within the business is like, okay, well, what do we need a kind of a specialty person on being the brand president or business intelligence or operations or marketing. So what we've done with Painter One is that we've actually hired, for all intents and purposes, hired on a part-time basis our franchisees to fill those roles. And they are our executive team. So our brand president is a franchisee. Our VP of business intelligence is a franchisee. Our VP of ops is a franchisee. And it's fantastic buy-in from our franchisees, not necessarily buy-in, but they have a lot more control as to what the franchisor does or how it implements things, because they're the boots on the ground. They're seeing things and they're able to bring things to us that we would have otherwise never have known. And it shares the workload within the franchisee. So it changes every single year. Every person gets changed out. So eventually lots of franchisees will serve in these executive positions. And we don't require a ton of time from them, just a few hours a week. And we don't choose those who don't have the time. But it allows them visibility into the entire franchise system also. And the more that we can rotate our franchisees into seeing the bigger picture rather than just seeing their little myopic, this is my one little county or whatever I deal with, it expands their vision. It teaches them a lot about how they can grow their business because of what they're seeing other people do. And just teaching them leadership skills or because they are now leaders of the franchise system. So,
wow.
And it's a cool natural progression because you're starting a franchise system, making money, right? Your royalty is like, oh, you did $80,000 this month. Fantastic. And I get 3% of that. Oh, that won't even pay my salary. Oh, maybe that'll pay. No, it doesn't pay the rent. Okay, well, how do I, there's no in franchising for the first, I don't know how many franchisees, but.
Yeah, that's fat. I didn't realize you guys did that. So then you guys are you rerouting some of the money that you would have used for a staff position? You're remunerating them or giving them royalty relief for serving in kind of that position?
Yeah,
if you don't mind me asking, you got my juices. My gears are turning a little bit on this one. That's a pretty cool idea. I haven't heard anyone doing that before.
So one thing that we don't necessarily want to do is do any kind of royalty.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For franchisors, our royalty revenue it represents the value of our business. So we don't want to increase our revenue. We want to have our revenue what it is because one day the company gets sold, who knows when, but we want to show the utmost amount of revenue that we can, but then we'll pay them back. So we write them every week or every month for their services.
That makes a lot more sense. That's cool though. That's really cool. Certainly it explains why you have such good cohesive buy-in in the Painter One network. I've definitely noticed it's different and very collaborative, where in a lot of places it gets very like, corporate, you can't see they don't want people seeing their data. They're like afraid of corporate, like big brother stuff, but it eliminates that. You don't deal with that like I've seen in other systems, which is cool.
Everything is a why. There are books.
Talk about marketing for a second, Conrad. You've got some interesting insights on this that I think vary a little bit from what a lot of other franchise systems think.
Oh man, marketing I don't know a ton about. There are smart people in marketing, and I trust them. And I allow them to make it work. And as long as they fit within the model, as long as the KPIs are working and they're getting the lead flow that we need to get. Now we've hired a company for Painter One, a company called Mentored. They're very good at multi-unit locations. This is all they do. That's all they do. So they're very, very good at that. The cost model for it is significantly less than anybody else that we've done. And their production of stuff, or production of leads and support is fantastic. Back in the day, we had our own marketing team in my old franchise system, and that was the largest team and the most costly for us. And now I think about, as you live, you think, oh, I wish I had done that different. Oh, I wish I had done this different. And with hiring somebody like that, like Ninth Root has been a massive a blessing, I guess is maybe the right word for it.
Yeah.
Because the costs are minimal for the franchisee, and they provide a phenomenal amount of service.
Mm-hmm.
And we on the corporate side have the visibility, if we wanted to see what's going on with the franchisees as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is a simple economics discussion in my head, but a lot of franchise systems they are really bent on having marketing in-house. Now, I know some in-house marketing teams that are freaking amazing, right? Like Heather McLeod, people like that over like Authority Brands. I've met some amazing marketers. However, just some basic math is what I always think. Okay, well, what is a solid marketer cost? I'm not talking about a VP of marketing at a massive franchise system, because that's heavy six figures. But if you're going to hire a director of marketing that could handle what you're doing, let's say you're going to pay, what would you say, Conrad? What would that cost you? 85, 90 grand a year nowadays? Yeah, so
more.
let's say 90 grand a year, right? To make the math easy, let's say $96,000 a year, so it's $8,000 a month to cost. Well, if you've got 30 franchise units and they're all paying, let's say, I don't know, $500 a month for a service. So you've got $15,000 a month of total cost. Am I doing my math right? Yeah. So, but they're getting highly personalized service at every one of those locations from an organization that's got people assigned to work with every single location. The amount of hours that are going into that, there's a strategy side from the outsourced marketing, a strategy side, and you've also now got individual account management and tactical advice happening, where if you had that $96,000 a year person, they wouldn't be able to do that because they're also working on corporate branding. So they're going to split their time, let's say 30-70. So all of a sudden you start doing the math, say, oh, I actually need two of him. Oh, wait a minute. Like I'm just spending more money on overhead than I'm actually giving value. And there's nothing wrong with these people, but I look at the economics of it and say, for what you're getting, if you have the right deal value or the right cost model with these outsourcing agencies, and $500 a month is decent. Like you can probably do better in the industry. So anyway, I think at some point you look at the economics and say, what value are my franchisees getting that I wouldn't get if I hired a high dollar strategist to come help run the system. And at some point, those numbers probably shift. And I don't know what that is, but you probably want to add that headcount at some point to help direct and manage. But if you've got a partner like you, I know Ninth Root well, great team. And they do a really good job focused on results. So, if you've got that, at some point you might not need it, or at least they elongate that time in which you need to spend the money on the headcount so your overhead can stay light, which I think is really smart.
One of the things that we anticipate on doing for, I'm not sure if next year, maybe the year after, is to hire one of our own franchisees.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing is our franchisees, and everybody's franchisees, they all come from
different backgrounds.
Some of them are amazing marketers, or some of them are amazing at this or that or that. So it's like, okay, you know what? Hey, for this amount, we expect about 2-3 hours a week out of it. It's like, is this something that getting a franchisee to be able to fill a role like that in the interim before you need to hire somebody who's $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. Yeah. Again, keeping it fractional, right? Fractional cost. But somebody who, you don't have to worry about that franchisee not understanding your business, right? You hire an outside marketing pro to come in. The first 6 months, you're going to have to hold their hand and have franchisees give them feedback so they don't go off the rails a little bit with the marketing, which does happen sometimes. Every marketer that I've worked with, even the best ones, they tend to come in with some preconceived notions of what will work because of what has worked for them in the past. So you almost have to beat that out of them. But with the way you're doing it with hiring a great franchisee up into the role, never happens, right? It's an immediate impact.
Yeah.
Great. Conrad, question for you. So let's talk about technology. And this is a big one. You're a bit of a tech wizard. You've had a lot of operations background. How should emerging brands and existing brands be approaching technology?
Oh, if they're not, do it.
Mm-hmm.
That is, technology will allow you to scale properly. If you're an emerging brand, or if you're if you're still doing things by spreadsheets or no CRM usage or something like that, please take some time to investigate somebody like Client Tether. So like Client Tether is we obviously use Client Tether, not obviously, but well, I guess obviously use Client Tether. And Client Tether is a fantastic tool that we have in our quiver. It's funny when we try and sell franchises and we go over the little technology demo, it's like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. It's like the franchisees are okay, so I don't have to hire a person for that. I don't have to do this. Oh, the software does all this for me. Oh, well, that's okay. It eliminates headcount for the franchisee if you get a good technology piece inside your business. Yeah. And the nice thing about it is like when you're emerging, when you're starting off, it's about unit economics, and it's about how can I get my franchisees to sell as much as they possibly can because I need the royalty revenue. And eliminating headcount for the franchisee is an important task because it minimizes their monthly spend, which hopefully they in turn put that back into marketing. So that they can grow again. And Client Tether does a fantastic job of eliminating headcount within the franchisees' offices.
And if you don't mind me interjecting, and this isn't about us necessarily, but I appreciate the shout out. The one thing right now that makes that what you're saying so critical is it is very hard to hire people right now. I mean, every franchise system, every client I work with, they're probably 25 to 50% understaffed right now. It's just crippling. A lot of them. I just got back from a home cleaning conference, and every single franchise owner I spoke to said if I could find the people, I could double my revenue in 30 days. But I can't get the people to do the work. And so anything you can do with technology, whether it's on the sales, marketing, lead follow-up, whatever side where we kind of tend to help out a lot, or it's in another aspect of the business where you're trying to create scale with technology, you're helping your franchisees a lot, especially because it's so hard to find people right now.
Yeah. And one of the things that we as founders kind of forget is are the numbers. We get so wrapped up in how the operation should be, and it should be so nice and tidy, but we have to step back and look at the numbers. And one of the things that whatever technology piece you choose is that I would recommend to have 3 or 4 or 5 different KPIs that need to come from your franchisees so that you can see and create benchmarks and KPIs for the entire franchise system. 1 is lead count. 2, lead to opportunity ratio. 3 would be your closing ratio. 4 would be a average value of a job or customer, something like that. And then maybe 5 would be the ROI of your marketing expense. With those numbers, you're a rock star to your franchisees because you can say, hey, across the system, or this is the experience that we have, you spend $1.20, or you spend $1 and you get back $2.27. And this is where to spend it. This is how to spend it. This is your break off of how many leads you're going to get compared to how many opportunities. This is what your closing ratio should be. This is what your average job value should be. And with those numbers, then the franchisee can go, oh, I'm above the KPI, or I'm below a benchmark, or whatever it might be. And what do I need to do to get above that or meet those KPIs? So the software that you do choose, the technology that you do choose, should be able to get you those numbers. And with those numbers, that is literal gold. I kid you not, it is, because it shows them how to scale. It shows them how to grow their business on a macroscopic level. They look down, okay, this is what I need to do. These are the lead gens I need to buy leads from. This is what I have on the marketing side. This is what I need to change with my salesmen, because our franchisor says this is what all the salesmen do, and this is what the average is, but my salesmen do this, and we're over here. So but the software is the mechanism that gets us that information.
Yeah, I agree.
In an instant, I can look at our franchisees and say, oh, he's not doing well. They're super exceeding there. They're doing very well there. And in an instant, I know who to call, or I know who to start saying, hey, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? Literally in less than 5 minutes, I can go through every single one of my franchisees and see where they're excelling and where they're not.
Yeah. One thing I love about what you're describing is if you're building a technology system or using one, like Client Tether or anything, as long as it can get you the data, the value that I've seen a lot of people derive from it is that normative data, the comparative data, right? So not only can they say, well, here's what the benchmark should be if you want to hit your numbers, but as the franchisor, as the coach, as the chief development officer that's looking after success post sell, you can look through the system and say, wait a minute, Bobby's not doing great on his close rate, but he's the top performer in the industry on scheduling his digital leads into appointments. Now you know also who my tribal leaders are in those areas, right? I can say, hey, Bobby, I want you to train everybody in the next weekly, monthly call on how you're scheduling appointments. And you leverage the asset. You guys are already doing that super well. You probably already do this, Conrad, but for those listening who aren't thinking this way, having this type of data also lets you say, all right, now Frank, you got the highest close ratio of everybody in the network. I want you to train Bobby specifically. Will you pair off with him at our annual convention? Will you have a lunch with Bobby and train him? How are you closing at 45%? Most franchise systems I work with, they don't even know what their lead conversion rates are, and even less by lead source. But I mean, when you ask them what their close rates are, they're like, I don't know, I just get a royalty check every month. But the ones that I work with that have this data, right? They are proactively coaching their people in the areas that they suck at on the sales continuum. And that's like you're saying, is gold. I've got one guy who he calls his people and he says, hey, you do realize that if you elevated this number 15%, you would have put $20,000 more in your pocket year to date. And they're like, shut up. I'm listening right now. Tell me what to do, right? It's not hard. It's not hard to coach, but you got to have real data to give them those insights.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is something that we do when we highlight our franchisees, and they present at our conferences, they present on our what we call power calls every couple of weeks. And another thing that you mentioned just a little bit ago, the royalty report is like, I don't know, I just get the royalty check. And we love our franchisees, but we're human also. And we want to, entrepreneurs love to push boundaries on certain things. I mean, we love to do things that are maybe not in the black and white area. It's maybe in the gray area. Mm-hmm. And franchisees often will try and hide revenue from franchisors. Mm-hmm. So to have a system that, and I'm not saying the franchisees always do this, but no, for me, I just expect it to happen. It's just going to happen. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. Franchise is like, oh, this is a cash job. Okay, this is going right in my pocket and I'm not putting it anywhere. But the reality is the more that they're intertwined with some sort of technology or platform, whatever you want to call it, like for us, for Client Tether, it'd be very, very challenging for a franchisee to not use the software to track everything that they do. Mm-hmm. And like in Client Tether, we have a royalty, like the royalty report automatically fills everything out, and it's awesome. We have to do very, very little to receive an accurate royalty report. Mm-hmm. And because of the ratios, and we can very easily check if things are slightly off or good or whatever it might be. But it's and for franchisors, my advice would be just to expect that 5 to 10%, maybe that's pretty high, but just expect some of it to get under the table. You're not going to get your money. That's just the reality. But the more that we can put tools and processes in to mitigate that, so much the better. Yeah.
And you bring up a really important point. When I'm working with clients, I run into, I'm stealing this from a conversation I had with the Entrepreneur Source. They're head of technology, but they build a Frankenstack, right? Where they've got like all these different things that sort of talk to each other with apps and APIs, and you don't, what you don't want to do is go the opposite direction too and try to buy something that claims to be everything to everyone all in one place, because they're going to suck. They'll be mediocre at everything. But if you can find things that are interconnected in this area that are natively integrated, to your point, you don't have to worry about data slippage and loss across multiple platforms, because that's where people can take advantage, and the systems also become unwieldy. So yeah, I think as a parting thought for technology, I know a little bit about this, but it's trying to make sure you balance functionality and best of breed tech that's easy to use, so your franchisees are incented to use it. I've talked to some systems that they applaud and cheer when they've got like 60%, 70% utilization of this new tech platform that they just rolled out to all their franchisees, and it makes me want to puke. Like, how can you possibly be happy about that? You're writing the check at corporate. They're essentially paying for that through their tech fund and their royalties, and then they don't use it because it's too complicated. So anyway, just a couple of parting thoughts from me on that as well.
One more thing to say is that it also ensures brand consistency. The more you're saying, if 60% of the franchisees are using this platform and the other 40% are not, there goes your brand consistency. And that, as in the beginning of your franchise business, you're like, oh, I don't really care about brand consistency. As long as we get royalty and as long as we get franchisees being successful, that's what I care about. But when you have 50 or 100 or 200 or 500 units, it's like, okay, it's all about brand consistency, because when I go visit New York, I want to go and make sure that this is the exact same experience that I had when I was in Miami, exact same experience that in Omaha. And that experience and that needs to be identical. Yeah,
agreed. For a lot of reasons, for support, for your validation calls. If somebody has a validation call and he's like, oh, I don't do that, I do it this way. I mean, instantly you've got that guy's probably not buying your franchise, or that gal, right? Like anyway, there are a lot of reasons, but it's also for the consumer. I moved from Havana, Illinois to Salem, Utah, and I want to get my house painted, and I find a painter one. Well, I'm going to expect, my expectation of the consumers, I have the exact same experience, and it better be way better or at least the same as my other experience. And that, I agree with you. The way they engage with the leads, the way they talk to them, the process they go through, the quoting process, the billing process, is consistent as possible. 100% agree. Yep. Conrad, I appreciate your time. We're going to have to reconvene and discuss and pull some more information out of that head of yours, but I appreciate you sharing some of that insight with us today.
No problem.